On a sunny afternoon in July 1977, a young boy around 10 years old was playing in the backyard of his family home with his friends in central Illinois. Hide and seek was the game, and it being summer, the three boys spent most of the day playing outside. However, this time, the fun would be cut short. Around 8:30 p.m., two giant birds approached the home. The boys all saw them as they swooped down towards one, who ran and hid in an empty pool. The second boy also managed to escape, but the third was lagging behind, scrambling to the side of the yard. One of these giant birds swept down and picked him up by the shirt 2 feet off the ground. As he screamed for his mom and punched the bird, his efforts worked and the bird dropped him on the grass, safe but traumatized. Later, the statements of the mother, son, and two friends were that they witnessed a jet-black giant bird with a 10-foot wingspan and standing as tall as a man. So, what did they see that afternoon in 1977? For hundreds of years, Indigenous legends have told of great flying creatures known as Thunderbirds. Appearing in folklore across North America, as well as other places around the world where ancient birds hold prominent place in mythology. But what happened in Illinois in 1977, and for the countless other sightings and encounters of enormous flying monsters around the world, these creatures are far beyond mere Indigenous myth. Join us tonight on Into the Portal as we investigate the history, mythology, and strange real-world tales of legendary giant birds.
Hello, and welcome back into the portal. I'm your host, Amber Ray.
Hey everybody, I'm your co-host, Andrew McKay.
And we're coming at you with Thunderbirds. Yep.
That's as good as I can do.
Yeah.
I was trying to do like the classic like Murder, She Wrote eagle sound anytime they do something to do with like Native American folklore.
Or the Navajo Desert.
Yeah, or the Navajo Desert. Yeah, every single scene transition, there's a eagle.
Yep.
Anyway, so yeah, we're doing. I've been really wanting to do this for a really long time.
Yeah, you've been harping on this for a bit.
And a few got bumped ahead.
Yeah.
But Thunderbirds and giant birds in general.
Thunderbirds kind of just slipped in there, hey?
It did.
We had a different idea for this week.
We honestly, we've had a list of all kinds of ideas that
And that
have
has
got
changed.
bumped around and changed.
Yes.
But that's
Anyways, we don't really have many updates, I guess, hey? Before we dive into this.
Yeah.
The only thing I can really think of is the items available.
Yes.
That I'm really pumped on, and I wish I had a bigger budget for myself.
I
would
right?
literally buy about a dozen pillows, probably, if I could.
Cover the whole bed in pillows.
Please.
But we finally got our logo formatted properly, so...
Yeah. So the black and white logo is up, available. We have merch, so we've got like t-shirts and these really nice looking like super soft crew necks that are just
cool.
They're really, really stylish.
Yeah, so if you want to support the show and if you like the show, check that out. It's through TeePublic and the link is on our website. And
we got lots of cool stuff.
It's awesome.
But anyways,
Anything else?
I think we need to dive into origins as we normally start off with on this podcast.
Okay, cool.
So
just straight.
Okay, wait a second here. Let's just see. I want to know what prompted you to be so fascinated with the Thunderbirds topic.
Okay, well, here's the thing. I don't even know if it was Thunderbirds per se that got me really interested, because I feel like that word's just sort of been in public consciousness. Like, we graduated from the University of British Columbia, and it's the Thunderbirds down in Vancouver, up in the Okanagan. It's the Heat, but it's the UBC Thunderbirds in Vancouver, but there's all kinds of different names. And obviously most of the totem poles on the West Coast and stuff like that, they have the different eagles and birds at the top, and those are Thunderbirds oftentimes, right?
Yeah.
I think it was just like stories in general of giant birds, if they could be linked to the Thunderbird. So that's what we're getting into in this episode. It's not just about legends, but...
So, to clarify, you're saying we're trying to link the mythologies of Thunderbirds, say in like North American folklore and all that history that's ancient, and globally too, because there is other Indigenous peoples and stuff that have similar stories.
Yeah.
So we're trying to connect that to the modern sightings that people have reported of these giant birds, these terrorizing birds.
Yes, I would just like to find some sort of truth.
Okay.
I'm trying to find something.
I honestly,
explanation.
For me, when you first said Thunderbirds, I thought of a episode of Astonishing Legends that I can't even remember what they were actually talking about, what the episode was about, but I distinctly remember, I don't know if it's me misremembering, it's like Mandela effect or something, but I remember them mentioning it was an astronomer, and supposedly he saw a flock of giant birds that would have had the like wingspan of a small plane, flying information on the sun or the moon. I can't remember.
Right.
And I'm just kicking myself because I do not know. I was like,
I can't remember.
I was rifling through all their episodes, like just the list of them, trying to figure out if I could find the reference or like some sort of spark that would clue into my memory. Isn't that so annoying
when you remember something that you're like, you can't find it anywhere?
If anyone else can back me up on that, I would really appreciate it.
If it was from one of their episodes, you might even be remembering something else.
Maybe.
Anyway.
It's quite possible, yeah.
We binge watch a lot of, listen to a lot of, I'm just staring at my phone.
Well,
watching
especially when I was in the cellar, like that's all I would do all day is just put on podcasts.
Yeah, very true.
Okay,
so
anyways,
we're already straying. So Thunderbirds, though, the origin of the Thunderbirds legend. The thing is it's kind of everywhere, but the sort of, for the most part, the origins are sort of Northwest American or American Indigenous and up into Canada as well. Indigenous peoples mythology.
Up to Alaska.
Well, yeah, for sure.
So that would, I'm almost, the way that it's been described, so you get lots of hotspots in Texas, Illinois, and Alaska.
Yeah.
And, was it Pennsylvania? But anyways, the way I was almost thinking about it, it's like, is this a migratory pattern? Like, are they flying from the south to the north and then back?
Because of where these, just in general, like the legends of the birds, like in terms of mythology, where they've been seen, you mean?
Let's just cover, we didn't even really, the Thunderbird.
Yeah, so let's get to that first.
Let's just, define what that actually is.
Yeah, so it's a mythological creature in terms of like the straight up definition. Like I will read you the Canadian Encyclopedia definition. A thunderbird, a supernatural creature prominent in Northwest Coast Indigenous myths. Thunder and lightning are attributed to the thunderbird, and we have theories on that are really cool that I can't wait to talk about. But anyway, it goes on to say, which produces thunder by flapping its wings and lightning by opening and closing its eyes. The thunderbird is said to hunt whales and uses its wings to do all kinds of different mythical superpowers, basically. So among some of the Plains First Nations peoples, the thunderstorms...
Can we just give an approximate wingspan first? Because I've heard multiple things. It's about 15 to 25 feet is kind of the range that I've... I'm just trying to differentiate between, there's lots of big birds out there, obviously.
Yeah.
These are not big birds. They're not turkey vultures. They're not,
No, they're massive birds that are, legendary creatures.
It's literally the 5 times the size of a known species of bird living in, the central U.S. or wherever.
Correct.
So, anyway, I just wanted to make sure we clarify that. These are giant birds.
Well, yeah, even this legend here, it says they hunt whales. You're going to have to be pretty large if you're hunting a whale.
Okay, that is crazy.
Okay, so that's obviously, a myth. That's part of the legend and folklore, and we'll get into more of that. But I mean, that's pretty wild. But basically, it's they were sort of the masters of the sky, whereas the orca were the masters of the sea. And so there's a lot of legends and folklore for the Cowichan Valley peoples of the Cowichan Valley, and also the Haida peoples on the west coast of BC, where this thunderbird does battle with the orca, and it's kind of just this constant sort of feud, I guess, between those two in the upper and lower ocean and sky.
That's interesting. Spirits.
Thunderbirds are often depicted in sort of drawings in an X shape, just like a lot of other birds, and sort of on rock paintings and things.
Or a triangle.
I've
seen the triangle for the body.
Yes.
And then, the head and the wings kind of coming out from that.
And that's just, you see that in all kinds of different stuffs. Iroquois as well, Algonquin.
Another thing I think we should differentiate is the fact that a lot of people, it's... Everyone basically describes a dark large object. There is discrepancies between feathered reports and non-feathered. Right. So we could potentially be talking about two different things, and some of these descriptions remind me of Mothman a bit. Like, that's because, like, we get things as, like, pterodactyl, like, bat-like wings. Yeah. With like, a scrunched up weird face like a bat in some instances. Others, we get reports of, like, a nice curved talon beak thing. Yeah. Or, sorry, a beak and then talons that are, like, strong, like a
raptor.
Exactly. Yeah. Raptor-like features with feathers. So, I don't know. Like, that was, for me, that was a whole point of contention. I was like, what?
Well, that's, they definitely vary all over throughout North America and then obviously around the world, all these different types of gigantic bird sightings. Yeah, like, it is weird how it'll range from, especially the feathers to no feathers thing, because it's a
completely different creature.
Yeah, we're looking at between an ancient bird or a dinosaur, even though we've actually like read things that talks about how there's evidence that many more species of dinosaurs were in fact feathered.
Or feathered in strategic areas, almost like how humans have eyebrows and things like that.
Right, and they weren't all, lizard-like, reptile.
Reptilian, yeah.
Right, exactly. But there obviously were reptile flyers, for sure. Anyway, so that's the definition of a thunderbird, though. It's a mythical creature for the most part. No, so it's just, what is this based on? Because we're the believers that, we talked about this in the Ogopogo episode, and we come across this every time we're getting into, like, indigenous legends and stuff, and anything for that matter. It's based on something. And whether it's just...
Basically.
I think it's got to be something more than just really, like, revering the bald eagle or the stellar sea eagle or something like that.
And also there is the other differentiation in First Nations folklore, like the Passamaquoddy Indian legends that speak of thunderbirds as actual men who transform into birds. Oh. So that is another sort of offshoot of the Thunderbirds or legend. Right. And to me, like, I stumbled across that Black Condor comic from, like, the just post-war era, that type of thing. Yeah. Apparently, according to a highly reputable source, it was a C-grade superhero, to be generous, and that they would often kill him off and then bring him back and whatever, and he was just kind of this weird flying guy. But I'm going to include that in the blog post, probably, that comic strip, because it was really cool.
And have a link to it, for sure.
Like, he's soaring high like a crow. So, lots of different cool little offshoots, eh?
Yeah.
So, again, like you were saying, though, like, what is this actually based on? There's so many things around the world besides North America, right, that describe flying creatures, things like...
Yeah, well, let's start by looking back, like we love to do, like, into antiquity a little bit. Our toes.
Long time ago.
We always do this. Mm-hmm. So... I think probably to me the one that stands out the most of legendary birds of antiquity is the roc, or a roc. So the roc, not the Rock like Dwayne the Rock Johnson. A roc or rock. I've seen two spellings, so R-O-C or A-R-O-C. Yeah. But it is a massive legendary bird in Middle Eastern mythology. Right. And it's depicted in...
Oh, and it was made famous in Arabian Nights, right? Okay. Yes. Sorry.
The punch. So who was that? That was like Sinbad. Yeah. Sinbad, right?
I've never read those. Nights? Yeah. No. But
it's like it's a biblical reference, though. Is it not? Sinbad, isn't that attached to like Old Testament stuff? I can't remember.
I can't comment on
that. But
I don't know.
It's definitely a part of Middle Eastern mythology, and it's crossed over into other cultures as well. But this bird was said to hunt like elephants.
Baby elephants.
Yeah, I mean, still baby elephants. I've seen others that just said elephants.
Baby elephant, full-grown rhino. What's the difference?
What's the difference? No, okay, but seriously though, I mean, think about that. Imagine that.
That's pretty gnarly.
So said to be able to carry away men, no problem. Attack, baby elephants, and basically.
And some people nowadays, like, because that Mark Hall guy that we read that book, he was saying that there actually is physical evidence to support the idea of a massive bird living in that area, and many people attribute it to the Haast eagle.
That's a different one. That's for the New Zealand. That's for the Pookie.
I've seen references to the Haast eagle.
Is that for Middle East as well?
Yeah.
I mean, I'm sure they have a massive range, because I saw that as well for different areas.
I might have maybe got that wrong, but from my browsing around.
Or maybe gold, because here's the thing: in a lot of these areas of the Middle East where this would be part of the legend, golden eagle definitely in those areas, in the mountainous areas in there. And, you know, we came across some really cool kind of like evidence that like birds even today can carry things way bigger than we think they can in certain circumstances because of updrafts. So in places in this area, you know, in narrow valleys and canyons and things like that, you never know. So
I can't come up. Sorry, I'm trying to fact check this past eagle territory, where they were found. Coming up with all sorts of bald eagle references, no Haast eagle.
Yeah. Okay.
Anyways, we'll say you're right.
Yeah, no worries. I've got it's an extinct species too, right?
Right. So it was like the talons that they had found.
Yes.
That was kind of the reference. But I guess I might have gone because the other sort of theory for the rock is the idea that it could have been that ancient large flightless bird, the Apornis or whatever.
Okay.
Apiornis, which basically resembles a emu. But, like, the legends were supported by the fact that its eggs were so large and its nests were large. And so people were thinking that it could have, I don't know,
been a massive
potentially been a manhunter. It would have hunted its prey on ground. Similar to, I saw clips from, what's it called, 10,000 BC.
Yeah, okay.
That movie, how crazy that was? But they have all those huge, like, megafauna. And there's this one scene where they're getting chased by whatever, the bad guys, whoever they are, and then they wander into this like grove where it's like literally like massive grass. It looks like a scene from Honey, I Shrunk the Kids where they're in the backyard and the grass blades are like massive.
Yeah.
And then essentially, they get like hunted down by these like things and they just like swoop in. They're like super fast. Obviously,
we should watch that again.
Actually, that would be a fun one.
That would be fun. There's another legendary one, and you're gonna love this name.
Ooh.
It's called the Smurge.
The Smurge?
I thought you'd like that.
Smurge?
That's probably misspelt, and I maybe just, I'm obviously butchering that. Classic Andrew bird. But it's a legendary bird. It's another sort of Middle Eastern one. Legendary bird in ancient Persia. It's just equated basically with the phoenix.
Cool.
And people think that the phoenix, actually, the legend of the phoenix developed out of legends of the Smurge. Along, you know, trade routes and the Silk Road and things like that. It's based, but it was benevolent. So it was,
not a manhunter.
No, just like the phoenix. It was not a manhunter, but it was a massive bird with a super long tail, and basically from images, it just resembles like a peacock or something almost now.
Okay.
But a massive bird.
Cool.
Then we've already said it. We've got the Pookie or the Pukai. Now
that's the New Zealand one.
Legendary bird from the Maori people in New Zealand.
Oh, okay. Mm-hmm.
This one's not nice. Not like the Schmurg. That sounds like something from Lord of the Rings or something.
I'm thinking Surge from, like, Toy Story.
That's way off.
Yeah.
What are you talking about?
I don't know. Schmurge. I'm also thinking, like, Smurtus. Burrito from...
Moving on. We're moving on. Okay. So we have the Pukai. So a legendary bird that attacked and preyed on humans according to Maori legend, and it was described by Sir George Grey, who was an early governor of New Zealand. I don't have an exact date for him, but I can pull that up and have it in notes. And basically it was a huge black and white bird, mostly black, with a red chest, red bits on its chest, and yellow-green tips on its wings. Whoa. So in Maori legend, it was said to kill and eat humans. It was also pronounced Hakawe, Hakawai. And it would even prey on basically there was also like moa and large flightless birds in New Zealand and stuff like that, and it was said to prey on those. No problem.
Moa. So we got another like
an emu kind of thing? Like bird, and this thing would just fly down, pluck them up, and just piece the scene.
What? Okay, wait a second. So an emu flying?
No, not the moa. This thing would eat the moa, the pukai. Right? And this would basically be similar to, like you've already mentioned, the Haast eagle, in terms of like it being a raptor. This was a bird of prey. It had talons that could pick stuff up and fly away.
Wow, okay. So
that's a pretty gnarly one, and that definitely, that crosses over into stuff that from witnessed events in the US. That we'll mention in a minute.
Yeah.
So, but that's one of my favorite ones. That's a cool one in New Zealand.
Another ancient one that we did come across, really, really briefly, I didn't really find too much info, is the Imgig.
Oh my god.
So this is maybe the most ancient. Well, it's spelled Imgig.
We're not doing a good job of making these things sound intimidating, though. Like the imgig and the schmerg coming at you, it doesn't sound too...
Well, you might be saying something different if you actually see them swooping down. But
Okay,
yeah, no, this one is cool too. It's very ancient. It's from Sumerian culture. And similar. It is pretty nefarious. It's a flying monster capable of carrying off antelope. Didn't have any specific reference to it snatching humans. I would assume if it's carrying off antelopes, it's probably carrying off babies and children too.
Well, even an antelope's pretty heavy. You could carry off a full-grown human. Like a full-grown antelope is probably 200 pounds or more.
Yeah.
It's gotta be.
I found that to be similar to the Rock.
The Rock.
Yeah.
We've got some really cool pictures of that. I can't wait to just like put those on social media and stuff. There's so many gnarly ones where it's like, they're all, you know, funny, like medieval paintings almost, basically, but they're gnarly. Like, just... Or
even there's ones of like rock sculptures or inscriptions and stuff like that.
Yeah. And it's just...
Or petroglyphs?
Yeah. Petro with a T.
Petro!
Yes. Yes, we didn't screw it up this time.
What was the other one, though? There's petroglyphs?
Pictograph.
Pictographs.
Now the one,
right?
Yeah.
So, anyways, yeah, that's...
So we're moving on. So those are some examples of legendary birds of antiquity.
Mm-hmm.
Now, we have some more theories as to what those might be.
Yeah.
Already given a few.
Mm-hmm.
But I think it's more enticing to people because most of our listeners are in North America, obviously.
Yeah.
And we don't want to alienate Europe. We'll be over there doing some crazy myths and legends eventually. But I think we should focus on moving into North America here.
Definitely.
So I've got some kind of cool info. We both have the same kind of notes here for the early settlement info. And I think it was really, really cool.
You're talking 1600s? Or?
I'm talking yes. Do you want to talk about Jacques Marquette?
I think you have more notes on that guy, don't you?
Okay, cool.
Yeah,
so... Basically, yeah, this was an interesting one. So 1673, some of the first European travelers, heading up the Mississippi River, they come across, well, along the way they're hearing legends, obviously, all oral tradition stuff, about monsters of different kinds, but specifically flying creatures.
Okay.
Then they're at a certain point along the Mississippi River, and they come across pictographs, is how it's described in most of these documents that we've looked at, but they're both pictographs and petroglyphs because it was in fact scraped into the rock about a half inch and then painted. So it's a little bit of both.
Okay.
So Jesuit French priest Jacques Marquette wrote about these massive monster pictographs in 1673, but they were only partial. Some of it had fallen off even by this point, and this is quite a long time ago. So this is obviously pretty ancient. And a part of obviously the local folklore there, that was a big deal because this was like this was massive. It was like the thing is there's not a clear description because of how long ago it was. The most accurate description came in 1883 from somebody by the name of S.H. Russell, who basically said that it was a massive pictograph that had the face and head of a bear, the horns of an elk, and I've got an interesting point about that, but also wings. And sort of a serpent-like body. Now,
could that have been like a shrine if it's that big?
I know, right? It's like, and it was like, probably three stories, like at least 30 feet. Or more,
yeah, 40 to 50 feet.
Yeah, massive. It would have been quite the undertaking because it was etched into the rock. It wasn't just painted on. It was like a half inch into the rock and then painted for effect. Now the elk horns was cool because like that reminded me of the Ogopogo. Because we looked at some paintings from the local museum, Indigenous Museum. And they had the elk horns on the creature.
Oh, that beautiful painting.
Gorgeous painting. Now, I know that sounds crazy and just like mythological and like way out there. But the people, the local Okanagan peoples, they think that the Ogopogo was both a benevolent spirit creature, but also a real manifestation, a real thing.
Right.
So that's a cool kind of connection there.
You know what that kind of reminds me of too? Like the way you're describing all these different animals kind of incorporated into it is it seems like just a different version of the totem pole. Right? Yeah. Where you get all the different, like, I don't want to say characters, but you get
it's like a painting of
the spiritual like animals all in there together. Yeah. Like, that's interesting. So there is an actual history or interpretation from the Indigenous people that may have created that. Is there? It's just kind of a lost history.
I think.
And does it still exist to this day?
I don't think there's would be much evidence of it left.
Dang.
I definitely didn't see any pictures
That's
of what would be left. I mean,
yeah.
even for there were some pictographs on the cliffs at the lake where we go in the summertime, Christina Lake, and when we were kids they were super vibrant, and now they're basically gone, and that's only been 20 years.
It's sad. And even Coralie, when we went to the West Side Indigenous Museum, and she was telling us that there are petroglyphs or pictographs. Was it
Pictographs is with like the paint, with
right?
the ink.
Okay, with the ink, yeah. So there was pictographs of like Ogopogo and other sorts of things, but it had been subject to like graffiti and other sorts of things, so it's ridiculous. Really hard to kind of actually appreciate them for what they are.
Yeah, those people deserve a swift kick in the nuts. That's for sure.
Yeah.
Anyways.
Annoying. So after 1673, it kind of jumps to the 1800s, hey?
Yeah.
I had just a brief snippet where it was discussed, I guess, this Lordsburg. It was a town in New Mexico.
Lordsburg. What a name.
And it still exists. It is definitely in decline. I was looking at it.
The Lordsburg population is dropping. It's not a hot real estate market.
It's one of those towns that just kind of is.
They got no new condo developments there?
Unfortunately not.
Okay.
But anyways, so it was just like a really brief, vague reference to how the locals, there was basically a lot of talk, constant talk about sightings of pterosaurs or petrosaurs. I got petroglyphs on the brain now.
It's got a P at the beginning, but it shouldn't be there. Pterosaurs.
So pterosaurs. So that is a genus or family or something of dinosaurs. So that incorporates a lot of things like pterodactyls. Yes. I can't remember the other names.
Basically, a
lot of things that start with
reptile family.
Exactly. Long gone extinct.
Supposedly. Possibly not. Maybe.
And then, of course, we also have this incident in the 1890s. And I've heard multiple dates. I've heard 1886. I've heard 1890.
Okay, tell me more. I don't have that.
Well, you'll know what I'm talking about. But
way to tee it up as exciting.
Well, it's exciting for the listeners.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah.
So, in the desert, apparently there was a couple of ranchers. It's debated how many actually were there present.
Okay.
Some accounts say 2, some accounts say 6 to 8.
That's okay.
So apparently they came across a giant animal in the desert. Reports vary. Some claim the animal was killed and strung up for a photograph, which is kind of misleading. Right. I feel like that was definitely perpetuated by Jack Pearl's article in the 60s, the 1960s.
Yeah.
But anyways, the other story is that this was from someone who apparently knew one of these cowboys or ranchers that was there.
Yeah.
Supposedly, the real story was that the monster they encountered was real. They never killed it, though. They never strung it up on the barn for a photograph. And to this day, that photograph is missing. And no one knows where it is. But there are people that will say they saw it.
Yeah. Which is bizarre, because there's quite a few people that will say they saw it.
Yeah.
But multiple people have searched for it, including a Canadian that you mentioned that was going through the records of, what was the publication again? It was like an super old publication. It was like Epitaph.
It was the Epitaph. Okay. Yeah, the Tombstone Epitaph.
Right. Okay. Mm-hmm. And it's just bizarre. It reminds me
of Tombstone, the county. It was like a town.
Yeah.
It wasn't just like a creepy ass
Tales of the Crypt Keeper.
Yeah.
No. But that reminds me of, like Kincaid's Cave, Smithsonian. Supposedly things sent there. Were objects sent, they disappeared, gone.
But there's people like Ivan T. Sanderson who says that there was some things I read that said that he had come across it, or maybe he just espoused it because he had documented testimony from people who were supposedly reputable who had seen it.
Right.
And then there's stories where you get like people who are like, I had it in my possession, and then I gave it to some people to borrow, and then I never got it back.
And just to be clear, again, this was a supposed photograph of a 36-foot wingspan.
Yeah.
So six full-grown men standing in front of it, arms outstretched, touching fingertips, and it took all 6 of them to barely make up the wingspan, supposedly.
Mm-hmm. So this is massive.
It's a massive bird.
This would have been the top end of what
this would have been bigger than most.
Yeah. The only other reference I had that was bigger than that was supposedly cited, and it was a living bird, was from 1969, and we'll get to that one.
Okay.
But after the 1890s,
Well, what do you have there? You got something?
I'm just up to the 1960s after that.
We've got it.
Okay, we got a bulldog in the room, and she is snoring like a train.
Yeah, it's her birthday today, so she's allowed to be in here. But hey,
Hey, Stella Bean,
stop snoring.
She's like, what? I was just sleeping here. Come on.
I think she's good.
Yeah, she's good.
Okay, where are we at? Sorry,
I wonder if that actually was picked up.
I wonder.
I wonder. Anyways, back on track.
Back on track.
So, you have something before the 1960s, or?
Well, as long as we're on sort of the topic of the Jack Pearl and his works, although they don't sound exactly. It was a bit for, shock value or whatever.
Exactly, and I just came across some things that he was writing for like men's like pulp magazines from like the post-war era, things that were highly exaggerated, a lot of patriarchy and whatever.
Exactly.
Like
so that's the one thing about it. But at the same time, there were articles that I looked at that that said he was definitely that type of writer, but he also did like legit interview real people and like talk to people. So one of the interesting stories, 1944, stories that were coming out of California from a Japanese internment camp. Ooh. So basically, early on in the not early on in the war at this point, but basically early stages of this particular internment camp that he had been referring to, there were some escapees, and people would escape, and they would head to basically like the Chinese district, the local Chinese district, to try to hide or blend in, or hopefully get some camaraderie from their brother Orientals or whatever. Would take them in. Didn't really work out because they didn't want to get screwed over themselves, right? Yeah. But the story goes that there were some local indigenous people in the area too. I don't have the name of the exact group, but he mentioned that basically they reported seeing some of the escapees that were never found being picked up and carried away into the mountains by Thunderbirds. And this was looked into by the officials at the prison internment camp. Yeah. And they couldn't find any trace of the escapees anywhere, and every single other one of them before that had been like apprehended, basically.
Interesting.
So, and the reason it was so profound is because these two like younger boys, indigenous boys, basically were in a panic, and they didn't know what to do. They came out and like told everyone what they saw because they were legit freaked out about it, according to Jack Pearl. And he cites R.J. Young, a California ornithologist at the time, who says he believes that a species with a 25-foot wingspan or more could exist, quite possibly does exist, and quite possibly does exist somewhere in the West.
Cool.
So, yeah.
That's
kind of an interesting story.
That's spooky.
Yeah.
That reminds me of, okay, these would have been like adults, right?
Full grown
adults, obviously in an internment camp. Those were terrible conditions. I don't want to equate them to like say like Holocaust concentration camps, but they were very similar.
Not nice
in a lot of ways. And like all these people were like, a lot of them were on the verge of malnutrition, things like that. So they might have been easier. They might have been a little bit more
possibly easier prey.
To pick up.
Yeah.
That reminds me of this blog I came across called The Wanderling, and it was very questionable. Okay. But the idea that these were carried off, like someone could have been carried off into the mountains by a bird. He started off his blog account saying that he, as a young boy, he had a memory of basically wandering away from his home at night one time, and the next morning he found himself, like, he woke up in the desert, in the mountainous desert, miles away from his home. And he didn't know how he got there. And then he started to go off on, like, he started to talk about Thunderbirds, and then he started to talk about UFOs and all sorts of weird stuff. And I was like, this is not.
That's a bit of crossover.
This is just, there's no context. It was very vague. And so I was like, I'm just going to leave that one alone.
Right.
But that reminds me of that, because it's just like a small child being carried large distances into a mountainous. And I think it was in California or New Mexico or somewhere in that neck of the woods, like, more arid region. I don't know.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah. But
well, I mean, so yeah, I mean, I don't know how. I think you definitely got to take that guy's work with a grain of salt. But this next one, I think
more than a couple grains.
Yeah, a couple bags.
Couple heaps.
Couple kilos.
Ooh. Couple of kilos.
You cracking more cider there? All right.
Why not?
Why not? We're moving into the 1970s, are we? Is that correct?
Pretty much. I have a cool quote.
Okay, go for it.
Okay. Time for a dramatic reading. Quote, "The forested region along the Allegheny Plateau of Pennsylvania seems to get more than its share of Thunderbird reports. In 1969, the wife of a local sheriff spotted a huge bird sitting in the middle of a creek near their cabin. When it took off and unfurled its wings, she estimated it was about 75 feet across." End quote.
That's a bit larger than some of these other ones we've been reading about.
Big. That's more than big. That's massive.
That's
the size of a medium-sized plane.
That's too big.
And even if you cut that in half, 30 feet, 32 feet, from 75.
That's still bigger than...
That's massive.
That's huge.
So,
think about that.
We're going to get into the theories, but yeah, like I kind of equate that one with a very foreign I'm not going to try right now. Let's save that one for later.
Okay.
Listeners, you can guess which bird I was alluding to in our theory section later on.
Right.
But yeah, after the 1969 sighting by that woman, the wife of a local sheriff, hey, like that's...
You got to think like that's got some credence to it.
I don't know.
I mean, wow.
It is 1969.
Yeah,
I don't know. There's some crazy stuff going on.
That's very true. Very true. I think I want to talk about the Marlon Lowe case.
Sure. Let's do it.
Because that was pretty much...
Well, that was 77, wasn't it?
Yeah, are we not quite up to that? Was there one before?
Ooh, I've got a couple different... Yeah, like, because in
There's
Texas...
more? There's more.
Texas. Get what tack in Texas. Everything's bigger in Texas, so...
Yeah. Including the birds.
In 76, there was actually a spree of sightings within a 3-week period.
Right.
So this was cool. Like, many people claim to have seen a pair of giant birds. Okay. Some only spotted one, though. Right. It kind of went back and forth. The first sighting was from a police officer named Arturo Padilla.
Right. That's right. I remember that one. Okay.
So he spotted this giant bird from his cruiser. So it was in the early hours of the morning. But he was supported by his partner, Homer Galvin, who spotted the creature again only a few minutes later. And apparently, this was a huge dark object that was gliding through the air. There wasn't any description as to whether or not it had feathers, but it never flapped its wings.
It was just cruising.
It was cruising. Yeah.
Was there indication of how high off the ground it was?
Good question. They didn't really go into that.
Because obviously if you're lower down, you'd think, okay, well, you can't be cruising for that long. You're going to have to flap your wings. Mm-hmm. But interesting. Very interesting.
And so it just kind of continued on from there. There was another guy named Alberto Guajardo.
Okay.
And this was at 9:30 at night in Brownsville, Texas. And I think this was the same week. He heard a huge thump on the roof of his mobile home.
Okay.
He went out to investigate, and he saw a massive bird in his yard. Like, a massive bird. Like, something like that he had never seen before.
Yeah,
like,
it freaked him out.
Yes, this is... Yeah. And then from there, again, you get a couple of sisters. They spotted this thing down by Brownsville Pond. And, again, they were the ones that described it specifically as having the face of a bat. So that's freaking weird, man.
That's a bit different.
That is really different.
That's a bit different. That's more of where you mentioned earlier on where it's like, okay, that sort of reminds me of almost Mothman.
Yeah.
And if you're not familiar with Mothman, go listen to Astonishing Legends 3. I think it's a 3 or 4 parter on Mothman, and it's awesome. 4 parts,
yeah. It's good.
Super detailed.
Yeah, they went into it.
So check that out.
Or even just get John Keel's book.
Yeah, you can do that
Prophecies.
Too. Absolutely.
It's an awesome book. That was one of the original
Do we have that on our bookstore? I
hope so.
I think we do.
We did. I don't know. We might have taken it down, but we should put it back up.
But that sort of reminds me of that.
Yeah. Okay, so basically, after that, there was another highly, I would say, like, reputable sighting, because this was in the morning. It was clear day. It was 3 school teachers driving on their way to work, to school. They saw a creature that they described having about a 12-foot wingspan that flew over the car while they were driving.
Crazy.
And upon arrival at the library, one of the teachers went to at the school. They went to the library in the school, and they found the closest thing would be a pterosaur. So like the pterodactyl, that type of thing. So that's kind of interesting.
Huh.
So.
Yeah. Well, that's that's the main point, I guess, where things differ. It's the difference between the vast majority where it's a jet black or near jet black creature, and that even goes back into the ancient birds of antiquity, where it's like the auroch was different colors, usually dark, and then the pookie was darker, but with some other random colors and things. But yeah, jet black for the most part, and then in these other ones where it's like more of a reptile, almost, or a bat-like. Yeah. Seeming.
That kind of correlates to the John Huffett, that guy that was like half Cherokee who filmed that controversial footage.
Right, that's okay.
Okay, you want to jump into Marlon Lowe first?
Well, no, we can do, yeah.
Well, the only thing I was going to add is just the idea that he described these birds as having necks of cracked leather. What was that guy's name again? John Huffett.
Okay,
or
cool.
Hoffer. Yeah. I saw two different spellings. Like that.
I mean, the article that I had on him, it was just referred to as Texas John. So
right, Texas John.
But that was 1977.
Yeah. So same year as Marlon Lowe.
I mean, it's
Marlon
in
Lowe,
the
I
same.
thought was 77.
It's in the same range, and that would make sense, wouldn't it? I mean, he's over in Illinois, but I mean, it's same year.
Texas, Illinois, yeah.
Let's talk about Texas John then, because that was a really cool thing. Basically, he was fishing with his son. Okay, they're on Lake Shelbyville, according to the one I got here.
Actually, yeah, I heard that reference. Yeah.
So he's fishing. They're on the boat, and they see two massive birds roosting really high up in a tree. They didn't say what kind of tree, but it was like a massive tree, super, super high up. But even at the height they looked enormous. So they honk the horn on the boat to kind of spook them, to get them to move. And when they do, I think just one takes off at first, and then the second one did after. But he starts to film. They had like a video camera.
Yeah. Starts
to film the first one. And at first, there's definitely a frame of reference, at least because it's launching out of the tree. Now, we don't know.
But how far away?
Yes, exactly. We don't know exactly how far away.
Yeah.
I feel like the documentary we watched, where they're kind of critiquing it on that basis, being like, we don't know how far away the video was. It's like, okay, but there has to be ways of looking at the video itself and being able to gauge at like how much zoom was being used based on the pixels or something like that. Like, you'd be able to roughly guess how zoomed in it was. You'd think. I don't know. I'm not an expert on this stuff, but
zoom, equating that to like meters or something.
Because here's my point. Like, even if it was maxed out zoom, like, it wouldn't have been very clear. And how far can the zoom on a camera in 1977 go from a boat? Not super far away. You're not going to be a kilometer away.
I question the idea that, like, why wasn't this verified closer to the date that it was filmed? Because if it, like, he had an exact location, right?
Yeah.
So people could have, like hypothetically gone back, looked at, like, say the point, like they could have mapped out like where exactly his boat was, and then done like the surveyors, like get those angles and everything and do the math.
Here's the thing: if they noticed the birds, they were within a reasonable range. You're not going to see birds whether they're massive, even if it's a bird with a 20-foot wingspan. Yeah, you're still going to have to be somewhat close to actually notice it. You know what I mean? If you're freaking 800 meters away, you're probably not going to notice it, right?
Exactly.
So I'm thinking he was pretty close. But basically, they see these things. He busts out the thing. He's filming it, and people have been looking at this footage for years. Yeah. So we watched Monster Quest. Yeah. We like that one, but they had 5 different ornithologists on there looking at that footage.
5? I think
it was
3.
Was it only 3?
I had 3. But
maybe it was 5 when I was looking at an article. Anyway, I mean, many ornithologists have looked at this bait, right? Yeah. Okay. Basically, the consensus was, a few said that it was definitively a turkey vulture. It's black. It looks like a turkey vulture. It's definitely a turkey vulture, but it's a big turkey vulture. Some said, okay, it's most likely a turkey vulture. I can't say 100%, but if it is a turkey vulture, it's the biggest I've ever seen. Yeah. And then there was one ornithologist who looked at that tape and said, looking at this tape, it's bigger than a turkey vulture, and I can't identify what this bird is based on this video. It's an unidentified giant bird.
Yeah. You know, another point to make too is that the second ornithologist they had reviewing the footage, he made the comment that, because we did obviously like John, he said that he was filming two birds. Yes. And the guy makes the comment, he was like, I can see right away from judging from the molting of this bird, it, you know, like it's kind of questionable, but then there was footage of both of the birds.
And molting is the development of the feathers, right? So you can see how old it is.
Yeah,
right.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry. Need to clarify that one.
Yeah.
But yeah, so he distinctly identified two birds that had been filmed. So both of them were filmed.
Yeah.
The story I heard was that John initially filmed one and it basically took off right away. And the second one kind of circled over them for a few minutes. And that was most of the footage. So it can be confusing for people that think that perhaps it's just one bird. But no, so there was that distinction to be made. But other than that, it was very inconclusive.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, just like all academic opinions, really. Like.
Yeah. And the other part about it too is like we said, there's a frame of reference at the beginning with the tree line, but once it's in the air, this is what becomes the biggest issue for almost all of these bird sightings, these giant bird sightings, is the fact that there's no point of reference. There's no point of reference. Yeah. And they did an experiment in the Monster Quest documentary with a kite. Yeah. Now, they're talking to, you know, Joe Blow running by jogging what they think this you know, the height of the size of the bird is, this kite, and they're making crazy guesses, but they're not asking people who would have an actual
that's just opinion,
a lot of or like a frame of reference as an expert.
Yeah, a lot of the sightings though were from non-experts.
Very true.
So
very true.
Layman.
Yes, indeed.
So you can't make an argument either way.
I still think that's really good evidence, though. Even just on the basis that one of those ornithologists, and possibly others that we hadn't come across, you know, said it was unidentified. So anyway, I think Texas John, that it's super strong evidence, I think, for at least something that's unidentified.
Yeah, and then again, like Mark Hall, like he made the comment too, it's so easy to discredit him. Despite this is physical evidence, like, you know, this is objective, like it's filmed, like it's not like he would have like tampered with the footage, like
well no, and that was that was definitely not a thing.
No.
Yeah, nothing was tampered with at all.
No.
It kind of reminded me a little bit of like the fold. I've referenced Ogopogo twice now, but a bit of like the fold in film,
right?
Because the frame of reference, you know, how far away were they? You know, because that is estimated 60 feet, but it's like, you know, a little bit obscure depending on a bunch of circumstances. So it's kind of, you know,
it's higher quality footage though.
It's
much higher quality.
Yeah. But it wasn't even that much earlier. I mean, Folden, that was like 68 or something. I guess it's 10 years or 9 years, but
still, I guess that does.
A lot can happen in 9 years. Anyway, okay. But I think we're moving on to the most interesting one.
This is definitely the most case. The most cited.
The case of Marlon Lowe. Mm-hmm. Now he is an interesting character, this guy.
Really is.
And I don't mean that in terms of like this happened when he was a kid, but he's been interviewed about it throughout his whole life. Mm-hmm.
Never wavered.
Like, no.
It's never really changed.
The story stayed the same the whole time. Do you want to tell it?
You go ahead. You got all the info.
I mean, I have it in bullet points, but I'll try to do my best to. I'm not doing a dramatic reading. But basically, Marlon Lowe, 10 years old, he's in the backyard with his friends. This is in Illinois. Mm-hmm. And it was in the afternoon, daylight. So he's playing with his friends, 2 other friends from the reports that I had read. Okay. They're basically, all of a sudden, they noticed, some reports say there was 2 birds. Others say just 1.
Yeah. Okay. I've seen that too. Mm-hmm.
But I think according to him, it was just the 1, I think. I mean, he focused on just the 1 in the story anyway. They didn't mention that in the documentary, though.
In Mark Hall's book that I read just like a couple hours ago.
Isn't that an interesting discrepancy, though, between the Monster Quest documentary and the Mark A. Hall book?
Yeah, that is funny.
Right? I think the Monster Quest missed something there, perhaps.
Maybe.
Anyway, not to be,
because there are so many sightings where it pairs.
I don't want listeners out there to think that we're leaning that heavily on Monster Quest documentaries, because we definitely do a lot of research, but they are really fun.
Anyway, I love the visual. I'm a visual learner.
Yeah,
so.
definitely.
helps.
But anyway, basically, they noticed these birds and it swooped down, started to kind of come after them, and the friends jumped and hid in an empty pool. Marlon Lowe was lagging behind, and one of these birds, which clearly was a raptor of some kind because it had claws that were designed for picking stuff up, right? Grabs onto his shirt, picks him up off the ground. He's kicking and screaming. He's screaming for his mom, and he's punching this bird, according to his story. His mom...
He's lifted 2 feet.
He's lifted 2 feet off the ground,
yeah,
according to his story.
Yeah.
His mom, I believe, sees this through the kitchen window and runs outside through the side door.
Yeah.
And sees this bird, and it drops him just as she's coming out. Like, she sees it holding onto him, drops him as he's hitting it. She starts
booking it towards him, eh?
Yep, running towards it, drops him on the ground. He bails out on the ground, and the bird goes and lands up in a tree, either in their yard or in a neighboring yard right close by, and tried to land.
Yeah, right.
It tries to kind of settle in a tree, but it was like too heavy, too big, and then it takes off.
Crazy. Yeah, I definitely... Okay, the one variation I've heard is 2 birds, like we said.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, again, Marlon Lowe, poor little Marlon's lagging behind, and the birds just start going at him, essentially. And then the one ends up hooking onto his like, little not a t-shirt, it was a little tank top he was wearing.
Yeah, tank top.
And lifted. Apparently, the tank top didn't actually suffer much damage.
No,
it was slightly frayed, but it wasn't actually
That is a durable tank top. She's shopping in the right spots.
Yeah.
TJ Maxx.
Go Mrs. Lowe. So that is definitely the sort of hallmark case, hey, that most people would hear of when they start to look into Thunderbirds. And really, the effect it had on this guy, like,
here's what happened after that. They obviously reported it right away out of concern for others' safety.
Yeah.
Right? They were like, that's insane. We have to let people know.
Yeah.
They were ridiculed. Obviously. People investigated it, but they were ridiculed. And this is one of my favorite lines. One of the first people to make a comment about it. Where do I have the actual name? So I can slander this fellow. No, I don't have it. It's somewhere. But he was an ornithologist. An ornithologist named William Beecher. He said, quote, "There has never been a bird large enough in the history of the world that could carry a 65-pound load." End quote. That's the dumbest thing I've ever heard in my entire life.
Yeah.
There were flightless birds that stood 9 feet tall. There were birds that flew that had wingspans over 26 feet, possibly more. Mm-hmm. You're telling me they couldn't carry something the size of a medium to large dog? Yeah, no, that's dumb. That's a dumb thing to say.
I actually wonder now, it's just dawning on me, what is the ratio of weight of the bird to the weight load capacity? Like,
okay, well here's an easy way to think about it, because that was talked about in a couple of the different kind of docs we watched. Mm-hmm. So when even they were talking about like an eagle,
yeah,
okay, and then in reference to Marlon Lowe, like for an eagle to pick up even a rabbit that weighs 8 pounds,
yeah,
that's a big mm-hmm. It's not going to carry that for a super super long time. It's going to get tired. That's like me carrying 2 big old bags of groceries and running down the road for however many kilometers. I'm going to get tired, right?
Yeah.
So for Marlon Lowe, they said 65 pounds, the bird would have had to have weighed like a minimum of 150 pounds, minimum, to actually pick him up and carry him off.
That's pretty confident. But the thing is, to his credit, to Marlon's credit, you have to wonder too, because like he could have exaggerated the height that he was picked up.
Yep.
He could have done that, but
I think he could have.
To his credit.
Yeah, okay.
A bird that big, traveling, say it's swooping down, so it's in an attack swoop. These birds, like falcon-like birds, they attack very swiftly.
Yeah.
And we saw that with the case of those monkeys, right? Which we'll definitely get into.
Yeah.
But anyways, yeah, so they'll swoop down at high speeds, and even if they can't, say, pick up a 65-pound object, they can definitely affect it. They can move it. They can tangle with it.
Yeah.
And if there's like some sort of, like he's dragging Marlin along the ground, there is uplift, right? Because he's got a wing spread, obviously. So he could potentially be lifting him, and like they're moving and struggling, and then he gets let go. But
Absolutely.
the thing is too, like maybe that bird wasn't expecting to carry him a far distance. Maybe it was like what were those eagles that we came across? Those African eagles? The crown eagles.
Right, which is another theory for just thunderbirds in general. These are just eagles in general.
Yeah, the progression
of African
eagles
crown
and their lineage
eagle
and everything
was the definitive proof that eagles do attack humans. Primates.
Yeah, because they're killing
sure.
monkeys. They're killing monkeys up to 45 pounds, right?
Yeah.
Mostly 20 pounds, though.
Yeah.
But the thing is with those, they've offered an explanation as to why a large bird that maybe couldn't carry something for large distances but would still attack something, they pick it up and they swoop it into a tree and start to dismantle it. They don't carry the whole thing.
No.
It's not like how we see, like ospreys carrying a fish.
Yeah.
They
do it just like a hunter would, right?
Yeah.
You don't shoot a buck and then just do, or what, I mean, I'm not a hunter, but I mean, like, you're not going to necessarily just take the whole thing. You're going to take you're going to take it in pieces, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So that's what these birds do. And there was evidence that there was actually, wasn't there evidence in the doc that we watched where it was like a child's skull? Or definitely stories about that in Africa.
It was the Tong child.
The Tong child.
Yeah, I have a note right here somewhere. But anyways, yeah, that was an ancient skull that they kind of unearthed under the nest of a crown eagle.
Yes.
So it was like ancient remains.
Yeah.
And yeah.
And its eyes and brain had been eaten out.
Yes.
And it was distinct.
They had the peck marks in the eye sockets.
Right.
That showed.
Right.
And it was actually determined that the cause of death was a single blow to the brain through the skull by the beak.
Damn, that's badass.
Or yeah, something. But anyways, just to reference that guy, that Scott McGraw.
Right.
Just to give him some credit, because he was the one that was doing the African crown eagle research.
Yeah.
He's a primatologist and anthropologist at Ohio State. But yeah, so he was the one that he gave insight into how these birds attack through the quick strike. And he was studying these birds on the Ivory Coast. He was studying the primates, and then he was finding these, like, he was studying the skulls of the primates underneath the nest.
And he found these strange...
And so, presumably, the ancestors of these, he reasoned, would have been hunting people.
Right.
Mm-hmm. During the age of the megafauna. So, this is like Pleistocene and beyond.
So this is where the cryptozoology comes in.
Yeah.
Thunderbirds the legends of thunderbirds have been like solid, like solidified in folklore for a minimum of 200 years for like North American people, most likely much longer. Mm-hmm. It's in ancient myths and legends all over the world. Mm-hmm. Could these be thunderbirds in some of these circumstances? Is that what it could be? I don't know. It's crazy.
So, okay, anyways, getting back on. So, we were talking about Marlin Lowe. From there...
I mean, they were ridiculed. They didn't do... His mom said that if she could do it differently, she wouldn't say anything.
Yeah.
They had dead birds left on their porch.
Really?
And their son, Marlin, basically went gray in his early teens.
What?
His hair.
Oh my god.
He had nightmares and couldn't sleep. It really affected him.
Yeah.
I still think, sorry, I didn't mention there before, I think the whole 2 feet off the ground, if something's flying down to attack you, like if I'm just instinctually, you might even, like if you're running, you might try to like jump to wriggle loose.
Yeah.
So if you jump and you're getting tugged on, it might feel like you're being lifted.
Yeah.
But you really have just
jumped.
You
would have no way of telling exactly how far off the ground you are.
But this is just it, and some people have had that, so that's why we mentioned the African crown eagle, because people were like, that makes, maybe, could it have been an African crown eagle that rode over from, across the Atlantic on the updrafts of a storm, made its way to Illinois, perched itself in a tree, and then decided to attack Marlin Lowe?
Nah.
No.
Well, it was dark, though. It wasn't... African crown
No,
eagles are like...
they're brown.
Yeah, they're light.
Yeah, no, he described it again, once again.
Mm-hmm. That's the black. Yeah.
Jet black.
Yeah. So it's just...
Oh, wait. Actually, sorry, not completely jet black. With a bit of the white. The bit of the white ring. So when they showed him pictures, when they showed Marlon pictures of what he thought it was, he picked out the condor, the Andean condor.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the Andean condor, it can have a wingspan of up to 10 feet.
Yeah.
And they're massive, massive birds.
Yeah.
But they're in like Peru, and like they're in South America.
Yeah, they're South American.
They're not going to venture very far. They're already super rare. It's even hard to even find them. If you go into the cliffs of you can't even find them in their natural habitat, let alone in Illinois.
Because they require special circumstances, like these updrafts, like the special air currents that can, kind of like they're often found in volcanoes, like in the middle of volcanoes. Yeah,
because they need that. They're friggin' heavy.
Just think about that. Like obviously, it's a thermoconductivity zone or whatever.
Well, they weigh like. I mean, I feel like I've lost my notes here. I can't find them. It sucks. But they're super, super heavy. I mean, they stand 4.5 feet tall, some of these things. Yeah. That's a big bird.
It's a big bird. That's a big bird.
So if you're flying around, I mean, that's going to take a lot of energy.
So I have another sighting from the San Antonio / Las Cruces, New Mexico sort of region.
Okay.
This is kind of like jumping ahead because we still have some other sightings, right? Like this is from 1998, and then there was a spree in the early 2000s or mid 2000s, I guess I would say.
I feel like the more of the Alaskan sightings were in the 2000s, the profound ones. So
okay. So before that, down in New Mexico, there was a Dave Zander who had lived in the area for about 30 years, and he reported seeing a pair of giant birds near his home. And this was in the Doña Ana Mountains.
Okay.
So anyways, he compared them to the size of small planes. This is a quote here. He says, all of a sudden, one of them jumped off and dropped off the top of the mountain, came down the front, and all of a sudden, these huge wings spread out. I would say the wings were at least a 20-foot wingspan. Definitely something out of the ordinary.
That's pretty massive.
Mm-hmm. He says here, he continued, it makes you feel like it could come over and carry you off if it wanted to. So,
Yeesh.
That's the vibe you're getting.
Definitely.
Anyways, that's the early 2000s. There's been so many random ones. Like, I have a lot of little just random blips. Like, say in Los Fresnos, this was in the 1980s. Texas, there was a featherless, gray-skinned leather thing flying through the air that glided. This was spotted from a car by James Thompson driving in Los Fresnos. But yeah, so anyways, just totally like it's almost like two different things.
I know, right? Okay, well, but yeah, it does. Anyways, it seems like two different things. I mean, the leather skin, it makes me like. Okay, there's also the ropen. So that's been spotted in Papua New Guinea. That's this ancient creature in Papua New Guinea that is like leathery skin.
Interesting.
So that's another one.
And this is recent?
It's been all throughout history, but as recent as 2004 and 2006. And then apparently as well, I have an article here from 2015 with two Americans from Portland who claimed they saw a pterosaur in Papua New Guinea. They couldn't actually get a good photograph of it. Of course.
Of course.
But there were also sightings early in the 40s too. So shortly after World War II, there were there were still military people in the area and also Western missionaries that began to work deep in the jungles of Papua New Guinea. I just have a few notes on that here. It was sort of just a side note because we were focusing more on North America, but I mean, and there's all kinds of different stuff. All over the world that are referencing these things. 1595, there's these cool like sea maps of Papua New Guinea in the area, which depict flying monsters. And presumably that led into this myth and this thing. There's supposedly still dinosaur creatures in the jungles of New Guinea. But I also have an article from the Smithsonian magazine basically saying that, don't buy into that too much. A lot of the people that are doing research for trying to find specifically prehistoric creatures are just trying to push the creationist theory and prove that dinosaurs have been around this whole time. Just like people have, and the Earth is only 6,000 years old and stuff like that. And if that's true, that would really suck for a lot of ancient people that were around before that.
That would really suck.
They might be a bit ticked off.
Got so many animals around here.
Yeah, I know. It's like
Noah's
we're
Ark.
sitting here in our studio, as we like to call it. It is
studio.
It's like, and then you make a biblical reference. It's like Noah's Ark.
I'm on point.
It's more like Dr. Doolittle's House of Madness.
Yeah, I know, it's great. Love these guys. Hey,
yeah, cats and bulldogs
even when Minnie
Shih
bites
Tzus,
me.
Shih Tzu poodles.
Can we say that he's a shit poo?
He's a shit poo.
Because he is.
He is. That's a perfect.
A shit poo.
That's what it is.
Anyways, yeah. So,
anyway,
do you have any more? Like, you were talking about these sightings in Alaska. Let's get into that.
I feel like, there's been a bunch of recent ones. But...
I'm curious about that because I actually didn't do any research into that area.
Okay.
So this is new.
There was a lady driving home from work just recently, and she...
How recently?
2018, February.
What?
And claims to have seen a bird that's wingspan stretched the entire width of the road and swooped over her car, and she called police to report it.
Yeah.
There's reports of pilots seeing all kinds of giant birds, and we came across the one multiple times that was referenced in the documentary, and then I've seen it in articles too, and it's so silly because I can't find his name. Mm-hmm. We can pull it up, and we'll have that referenced on the website, but all kinds of bush pilots see giant birds in Alaska. Most people think that this is the Steller sea eagle, but Steller sea eagles are mostly in Asia, but they do venture over into Alaska apparently, and they're massive birds. They can have like 8 foot to 8.5 foot wingspans. But this one pilot, he claimed to have seen a bird that was roughly 500 feet away from him that had a wingspan at least the same width as his plane, which was just a small Cessna basically. So it was like about 15 feet, I think.
I'm remembering this now. Yeah.
And he estimated that as the minimum wingspan. So this is an example. Like, I made a comment on a board and on Facebook the other day for like eyewitness, like people's opinion on eyewitness accounts. Yeah. I feel like this people's accounts for like pilots or hunters and things like that, it definitely has to carry more weight. It carries more weight for me because in the Monster Quest, and a few of the other short docs we've seen, they reference this guy and other pilots and basically say like, yeah, no, frame of reference, like, oh, he says he thinks it was 500 feet away, but if he thinks it's 500 feet and it's only 100 feet, it's actually a much smaller bird, right? And yeah, that's definitely true to most people. But if you're flying bush planes every day of your life for a living, and you see eagles and birds and stuff all the time at different distances, and you're not freaked out ever by these birds, and then all of a sudden you're like, holy moly, that bird is the same size as my plane.
Yeah.
That just seems bizarre that it would just be all of a sudden you have this issue with your frame of reference in your plane. That's too easy of an explanation.
It's easy to discount.
Yes. And I don't buy it.
No.
Most of these pilots like seem pretty steadfast. I didn't really have it, like, the accounts aren't too profound. They're basically like, we're flying, we see giant birds. They're however many feet away, and they're super big. We try to get closer, and they fly away. You know, no proof, no photos or anything. Just
that's weird. Why? Someone's got to have a freaking phone on them. Come on. That's annoying. I don't like that.
We kind of just we went super broad on this one, so it's like we could have picked one account and like gone down that hole with it.
Our next sort of cryptid creature, I think, is going to be more like that.
We want to be more specific with our next cryptid creature.
I'm just going to shout out right now, like, I am a huge fan of how Cryptonaut Pod is doing their
Cryptonaut's awesome.
shows. Their episodes are amazing. I'm starting at the beginning because it reminds me of like kind of like watching an episode of Scooby-Doo, except you're like watching it with all your friends and they're all making commentary on it at the same time or something.
Like Scooby-Doo.
Because it's like these hilarious, like the mill race monster. Like, come on. And like frog people or a frog. I can't remember what that. It's hilarious. And they're all really obscure and they're from like the 70s. So anyways,
I love it.
That's like, just a little shout out there because that's how I wanted to, our next little cryptid creature case is going to be definitely along those lines. I want to play Velma for a day. Right? Definitely. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Well,
Definitely.
But, okay, so from there, like, because that's the most recent, hey? We're up to basically present day.
Yeah, so, I mean, people see giant birds everywhere. And that's what we've been going over. Is that the basis of the Thunderbirds?
Is
It's been happening for centuries. Some of these things don't necessarily line up, like the case of Marlin Lowe. And we've got some explanations for some of them. So here we go. Jumping into explanations and then theories, basically.
A lot of this is, like, I have a lot of data as far as, like, physical evidence from, like, fossils and bones that have been found of various species that were previously unknown, basically up until the 20th century, and are becoming known now. Anyways, so the first sort of archaeological evidence of these giant birds I found, at least, was from 1952. Did you have any other earlier references?
No, not in terms of dates found. No, I've got some stuff in the 80s.
I love.
Stuff like that.
Can I just say its name? Because I
Do
love
it
so much.
Do it.
All right, the Teratornis incredibilis is discovered in Nevada.
Nice.
Yeah, isn't that cool? Teratornis incredibilis.
Excuse me.
There's a lot of really interesting, like the Magnificentness or something. I can't remember. I don't have it in front of me now.
The names are sweet.
It's funny, but this was bones, not a fossil, discovered in a cave. It was a Smith Creek Cave, Nevada.
Okay.
At first, this is funny because it was like a cache of bones, so they had like a whole assortment of things going on. And at first, they were taking away the smaller bones that they had identified as bird bones,
right.
And then they started to go through the larger ones thinking they were mammals, and they were like, what the heck is this? And they couldn't identify it, and then they realized it was a giant bird bone. And this was from, this incredibilis, which is basically, it had an approximate wingspan of about 17 feet. It's not the biggest that we're going to get into, but, 5.2 meters, people. Like,
that's massive.
That is
still,
pretty
that's
big.
Huge.
Mm-hmm.
It's huge.
And so that was like the first sort of cool fossil or bone remains that I came across.
Okay, I got another one here. It's a little bit later on. I mean, I'm sure you have some in between, but this one is this is huge. So we got Pelagornis sanderisi. So one of the largest flying birds and basically the ancestor of modern pelicans, like the king pelican, I think it's
kingfisher pelican.
Pelicans and what are they called? Albatross. It's like the king albatross.
Yeah.
So they're seafaring birds, 1983, near Charleston, South Carolina. And it was called, Pelagornis sanderisi. And this thing had a average wingspan of 24 to 26 feet.
Dang.
And it was a predator, apex predator, hunted mostly fish and squid. And presumably these fish and squid are giant fish and giant squid. Because this was like a bird that survived into the Cretaceous period, and it was gigantic.
Wow.
Tooth-like spikes.
Sorry, you said 26 footer?
Yeah, 24 to 26 feet.
And well, you know what? I can one-up that
Can you one-up that one?
Yeah, I can. And this was in...
Pashage.
Pashage. So this was 72. And basically, it was a type of pterosaur. Pterosaur. Pashage. It was the Quetzalcoatlus. And it had a wingspan of over 40 feet.
Crazy.
Weighed approximately 190 pounds. And this thing was probably, because it was found in Texas, so obviously it's inland. And it most likely fed on things from the ground, much like a crane. So it would have hunted things like fish or other small vertebrate or invertebrate or whatever. Newts, whatever. Things it can get its hands on.
Yeah.
Like frogs, probably.
Anything.
But that was cool. Texas, Big Bend National Park.
So yet another prehistoric bird that existed in North America. Mm-hmm. Could some sort of a relative have carried over? That's the cryptozoology dream, and that's what cryptozoologists think.
Yeah.
That there were definitely... I mean, all birds are dinosaurs, right?
Yeah.
And they're pretty hardy. And we see so many different species of them. They live in all kinds of different crazy circumstances and conditions. And that's what cryptozoologists are hoping for and think.
Well,
that there's definitely a possibility.
The horizons beyond.
That there's definitely a possibility that there could be. And there's been people that have said they definitively think that there's larger. We find new species all the time. The fact that it's big, we have this thing with humans, we have this thing with like big and small. Just because we think it's big, we think we should have seen it.
True.
That doesn't necessarily make sense. If these things
big
are in
often
small
means
numbers
fewer.
small numbers and the jet black aspect plays into the theories section.
Yeah.
So another one
Stealth
is Teratorns.
Yeah.
That's another North American bird that's been found, and we've got a picture of one that is super, super famous. I don't know exactly when it dates, but it's a black and white photo. It's old. It's got to be in the 40s or early 50s, something like that.
Yeah, I don't even know.
They're massive birds.
Was that the one where it's like this huge, like, it looks like a massive crow, and then there's like a doctor-looking guy with a suit?
Exactly.
Okay.
So, and that's what people think some of these birds in Texas, these sightings, could be a version of a teratorn, a descendant. Some sort of hybrid, perhaps, between a condor and a ancient teratorn, or something like that.
So
right?
Teratorn, like, so those would have been approximately, like 15 to 25 feet?
Yeah.
Or wingspan?
Yeah,
that would have been.
Wingspan, and standing quite tall, about, 5.5 feet.
I had sources saying that they could swallow a small rabbit whole.
Yeah.
It's like a big old gullet. They could just hawk her back.
That's pretty huge.
That is pretty big.
Because that's not like a snake where it's like stretches out. It's just a straight gullet, so you're just swallowing a bird.
And it would have been
swallowing a rabbit.
Stood like approximately like the size of a man, right? Like 5 to 6 feet tall, 165 pounds.
Well, and when we're talking standing tall, I mean, there was lots of birds of prey that were not flyers that date back 1.8 million years. And I can't pronounce these words. Why do scientists make these so hard for people like me? For us.
Oh dear. Oh dear.
For us, Shiracids.
What?
Oh,
there you go. It's coming out.
Yeah. I probably just misspelled this when I was making my notes. I'm realizing here.
Probably.
I suck at spelling. I really do. Anyway, colloquially known as terror birds, these things, some of them stood up to 9 feet tall. They existed through into the Cenozoic, and basically their descendants even up to 17,000 years ago, which is not that long ago.
Where were these? Are North American birds?
There was findings in Uruguay that so South America. Basically they were picture a raptor, so flightless bird.
Okay.
And yeah,
a raptor. That's so funny. Like, now I'm picturing like Toronto Raptors, like the mascot. But like, it's interesting that a raptor and like dinosaurs and birds are all kind of very, like, obviously they come from similar origins and they hunt in similar ways. And now I'm just like, my mind just trailing back to the 10,000 BC, that scene where they're getting hunted by these things. And it's exactly like the new version of Jurassic Park, where they're doing the same things. They're doing the hunting exercises, and that guy, what's his name again? That hilarious dude. I don't know. He's like basically teaching them how to do that and everything.
I don't know.
Anyway, sorry, that was a total side note. I'm just wandering here.
I mean, yeah.
But other than that, like, so Teratorn, like, I saw a discovery in La Pampa, Argentina. So these things did range quite a big.
There's evidence everywhere.
Yeah. And then you get similar, like, like Albuquerque, Alaska, New Mexico, all these things, like, wide range.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And you know what? One of the most recent of them all is the one related to the Maori legend that we mentioned earlier of the Puki or Pukai. And most people just assume that the Maori were thinking of the Haast eagle, and you mentioned the Haast eagle briefly earlier. Yeah. And it's an extinct species of eagle that was really big, like 10-foot wingspans and beyond. Weighed up to 33 pounds and more, which doesn't sound like a lot, but for a bird, that's quite large.
Sorry, 35 pounds?
33 pounds. 33. And up, depending on the gender. Mm-hmm. And they attacked moa, like the flightless birds, the same flightless birds that the Maori would hunt, and other, descendants of the megafauna, basically. And they were around up to, like, as recent as 600 years ago. That is not that long ago. Like, that's really, really recent.
Yeah.
So, that's not a huge bird. Like, we're not talking 40-foot wingspan, like picking up a kid, but that existed as recent as 600 years ago. Definitively, maybe there's still a descendant of it out there in the jungles of New Zealand that we haven't seen. I have an example of that. There was a herd of, I can't remember the exact name of it, but a herd of basically mountain buffalo, thought to be completely extinct. and they were discovered by a bush pilot going over a remote route on the Alberta border with the US, and they saw these buffalo, and they were they were thought to be completely extinct, and there was a completely isolated herd of them.
Aww.
And they had been completely isolated for centuries, and they tested them, and they were completely genetically different than their plains ancestors. That's how isolated they were. And this was like relatively recently. I don't have the exact date in front of me. But that just goes to show that's an entire herd of animals that animals
Hundreds
that
of
weigh a lot.
Crap ton.
Okay.
Yeah.
You're telling me there can't be a couple of giant bird species still kicking around, laying one egg here and there out in remote places and stuff?
With long lifespans that get old and it's
that's pretty incredible,
that is
right?
pretty cool. Well,
and
potentially.
Potential.
Or I can get into some other crazy stuff. But anyways, like as far as I feel like we've covered the gambit on known giant birds, extinct or otherwise.
Legendary birds,
origins, mythology, all this stuff. It's time for theories. But first, we have a little tidbit, I would say, from our friend Rob over at Our Strange Skies.
One of our favorite shows.
Yes.
Hands down favorite shows.
We just want to say again, quick shout out for sending us that book. I just read the introduction the other day, and I'm you're right. It is kind of
It's crazy.
But I'm really excited to dive into it.
Anyway, here's a little clip from Our Strange Skies.
Yes.
What's up, UFOnauts? It's your UFO guy, Rob Christofferson. Have you ever been curious about the UFO phenomenon, but unsure of where to start? Have you ever wondered about just what crashed at Roswell? Have you ever wanted common sense advice about licking UFOs? The answer's don't. Then check out the Our Strange Skies podcast, where we dive into America's rich UFO history and uncover what these sightings say about ourselves. You can find us on Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Stitcher, and most podcast apps, as well as Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Don't forget to look up, because you never know what you'll find in Our Strange Skies. In Gray we trust.
And we're back. So make sure you guys go and check out Our Strange Skies.
Yeah.
It's awesome.
Do it.
We love it. Okay, well, we're rocking into theories.
Whew. Yep, we are.
So I know it might sound strange for us to say that because we've covered a lot of... it might seem like we've jumped around, and we probably have. A little bit of an ADHD episode, but there was so many cool different things that were all giant bird related.
It's hard not to.
We just wanted to kind of make this a fun one where we were just kind of giving you guys a bunch of cool stuff. Bunch of cool tidbits.
All right, yeah. So I think maybe we should start on the more conservative end of the spectrum for theories here. And that would probably be the skeptic argument. Well, most definitely would be.
All right, let's hear it.
And I guess that whole theory comes down to, or position, the idea that people are just grossly overestimating what they've seen.
Yeah.
And it is easy to discount people perhaps that aren't experts or don't see these things on a daily basis, but a lot of people see the birds that they're familiar with in their environment on a daily basis. So in my mind, I don't want to discredit anyone and just, play that card and be that person. But at the same time, we do have to mention it because,
yeah,
it is hard to gauge different distances with no reference points and things like that. And,
indeed.
And you could even argue, I hate to say it, but with Marlon Lowe, too, you could say, this guy experienced years of nightmares after this. And when you are a child and you experience something traumatic, I'm not saying that it was any less traumatic, because obviously it did affect him.
Something happened.
Something did happen, yes. But he said he would dream about, he was fighting these birds for years in his dreams and things. Yeah. So really, you could... over time, perhaps develop an exaggerated account and
for sure
totally believe it.
I
totally believe that was what you experienced.
I agree.
So, in that sense, it's just something that we need to put out there.
But at the same time, that only works for some stuff. Some of the stuff I read was just the ultra skeptic, where it was nobody can judge. I don't believe anyone can judge the size of an object in the sky. Mm-hmm. Okay. that just seems crazy to me. If you're a pilot and you spend your time in the sky, nothing but the sky, I would hope that most pilots are able to judge the distance of other objects in the sky.
Approximately.
That's just me and my sort of maybe that's wishful thinking, but like I think there's people that are more credible.
Autopilot has done wonders.
Like the
No
autopilot
talent.
from Airplane. It's just an inflatable guy that just blows up. You press a button, it just blows up.
And once he starts deflating, you gotta blow him back up or else he won't fly a plane.
God. Anyway.
Some pretty raunchy scenes in that.
But I'm saying there's more credible eyewitnesses than others.
Yeah.
And I don't think that, even the footage from, Texas John, I don't think...
Or someone we didn't mention. Like, well, Texas John, yeah. Sorry.
No, go for it.
No,
that was it. Like, I just think that gives us something to work with.
It does.
It's a reference, and it's something unidentified. What were you going to say?
Yeah. Well, we kind of skipped over the Guadalupe account. That guy
That was another Texas one, wasn't it?
It was, yeah. It was from Oh my gosh.
San Antonio.
San Antonio?
Just outside, like, outskirts, I think.
Yeah, Guadalupe Canto, San Antonio, Texas. And this was in the mid-2000s, and he was in his car. I think he was chowing down some fast
It was
food.
like after work, and he was on the side of the road.
Yeah, so he was parked, and he essentially saw this giant thing land on a telephone pole.
Yeah.
And so that is a point of reference. You can go back to that pole, and he said it was about a third of the size, is the estimate. And so,
About 8 feet.
About 8 feet. That's
big.
So that's that's how tall it was. So
Yeah.
that's not the wingspan itself. Like,
And
the
again,
wingspan,
he's not an expert, but it's right in front of his face.
Yeah.
You don't have to be an expert when something's right in front of your face.
Yeah.
And
that kind of he made the comment too. He said that a lot of people probably just don't report these things because they fear being ridiculed. Just like Marlon Lowe was.
Just like Marlon Lowe. And
a lot of other people.
And his mom.
And that's kind of where we get into the cryptozoological element here.
Yeah.
Because there is the idea that perhaps these things aren't as rare as we think they are because the reportings go the sightings or whatever go unreported. And people are doing that because they exactly that. They fear the humiliation. And I've seen accounts from people from like bird watching communities where they're basically saying like, yeah, like, I live in Illinois, and I think it was, I'm not a bird expert, but I think it was a starling that this guy apparently saw.
Okay.
A starling. Or something. No, maybe it wasn't a starling, but it was something that was like a subtropical variety.
Okay.
And he saw it in Illinois, and he basically said like he submitted it to like the bird watching association he's involved with.
And he just got ridiculed?
And he did.
Yeah.
For that.
Yeah.
And it's not like he's reporting a giant bird that's of mythological origin. So
yeah.
In that sense, like you can make the argument that people just maybe they know this stuff and it's just kind of behind closed doors.
Isn't that just so typical of the academic community though in
Yeah.
general? That's why it's so awesome to have just like people even like Chris Cogswell from Mad Scientist, like
Yes.
that guy's got a PhD. He's the director of research for MUFON or whatever, and like that's great. People
and he
world
is
needs more
out
people like
there
him.
to find answers. He's not there to pose sensationalist questions, to just put out these like little tidbits, like these baits, and then just be like, oh,
Exactly.
and we have no way of following
It's real
up or
research.
whatever. It really is.
Real
He
focus.
wants to turn that into, well, he already is turning it into
Yeah.
a legitimate organization. Like, it's funny that I say legitimate organization as if it's like an illegitimate organization, but in the minds of a lot of like, say, conventionally minded people,
I think most people don't even know it exists.
yeah,
too.
especially in Canada, right? Like,
Yeah, definitely. In
we
Canada.
see it on things like Asian aliens, and we just kind of completely discount it because it sounds so ridiculous.
Right.
It's just, it's something in its own realm.
Right.
But
So, yeah, cryptozoological.
we digress.
Cryptozoological angle. I can't even talk today. Oh my gosh.
Cryptozoological. So these people are thinking it's from the pterosaur family or something along those lines, the pterotorn, that type of thing.
Okay. So those are two different things. I mean, the
sorry,
pterosaur
yeah.
would be the
The
dinosaur
pterosaur
angle.
family or pterotorn raptor genus.
Right.
So
here's the thing: could it have mixed? Could it be some sort of ancient species of pterotorn that definitely existed not that long ago, like into the end of the Cenozoic, I believe. Mm-hmm. and into the Mesozoic. Is that correct? Oh my gosh.
Can't confirm
but
that.
But they're one of the more recent species of large birds.
Went extinct like thousands of years ago,
right.
not tens of thousands.
Exactly. Could there have been some sort of offshoot with condors or some other species that we do know of that are already ginormous? That's a part of the cryptozoological theory. Here's the thing with me. It's like a lot of this stuff, like Illinois, you know, this is like the middle U.S. I find it hard to believe that, a lot of people find it hard to believe that a brand new species could exist in that type of location. For me, it makes me think about Sasquatch and stuff like that. I feel like the Canadian, like BC, West Coast, when I'm thinking Thunderbirds, the Haida people seeing Thunderbirds come in from the coast, that's a territory that's so massive, that's seasonal, that could actually harbor a small group of these giant birds.
It really could, a small flock. And just for everyone's reference point, I actually didn't know this until like a week ago, but essentially our provincial forest lands, they are the equivalent of France and Germany combined.
Yeah.
Of like uninhabited, like
forest.
wilderness, like yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm getting more and more convinced that there could be a Bigfoot and other cryptid creatures out there.
Absolutely. It's massive territory. Yeah. And the indigenous peoples throughout it believe in these things.
And they were the ones that actually inhabited the environment and had more of a communal existence. Like what we do these days, we just take over.
Exactly.
We're like cancer. We're just an infectious disease, and we don't communicate with that unless it comes knocking on our door. Right. So in that,
So there's many ornithologists and people that believe that that there's a species that is out there, and it's in actually numbers that are bigger than you'd think, like a sustainable population. And the same goes for Sasquatch and a few other things. And it kind of makes sense to me. I mean, it is so remote. And you're not perching in a tree and making a nest, but you're living in a cliff, or you're maybe nesting on the ground. I don't know exactly how these things might actually live, and feeding on deer and things like that on the ground. Yeah. Just like we're talking about the Tong child, where you're ripping it apart in piecemeal. You got drumsticks of this thing that you're taking back one at a time. You don't have to carry the whole thing.
Human drumsticks.
And just another hilarious, crazy note. I mean, just to go to show how big things were. There was evidence recently that an international team of scientists announced the discovery of a previously unknown species of prehistoric penguin off the coast of New Zealand. The cute little bird that waddles around in New Zealand. Okay, and they were around as you know, way back 60 million years ago, even their ancestors, right? Yeah. And this is one of them, and it weighed about 220 pounds and stood around 6 feet tall. A penguin. Could you imagine? If that was Pengu standing 6 feet tall, that's the only time I would be afraid of Pengu.
Pengu! Love Pengu. Well, okay.
But it just goes to show. I mean, it's crazy what things used to be, and if there were ancestors that kind of carried over, these things are massive. All kinds of different species.
And the thing is, too, like, some people make the argument, what about remains? What about, say, avid hunters that are out in the wilderness all the time that maybe never come across these ever? And / are people that would track these things if they saw them, and somehow you don't really get any accounts of that. So in that sort of note or whatever,
the theory for that is it goes along with the accounts, right? That they're jet black. Oh. What were you going to say?
Yeah. Okay. So you're thinking like a natural sort of camouflage, or nocturnal habits?
Possibly both one and the same, in the sense that like they are nocturnal, and a part of them being nocturnal is the fact that their natural camouflage is that they are jet black, which is what most of the reports are.
What if? I'm having a crazy thought here.
Crazy epiphany time.
Okay, I'm thinking like almost Cthulhu, like combining aquatic, like those oh my goodness, what are those little things called? Those little cool squid things that can change color, and they're like amazing and they're super smart.
What are you talking?
Crazy
squid things.
Like they're a type of squid, and they basically can change color at will.
Okay, I can't remember. I don't know. Continue.
What? We were watching that thing the other night about like giant squids and all this other stuff.
Okay, keep going.
Really cool, but anyways, people who are in this area know what I'm talking about. Oh, the cuttlefish.
Cuttlefish. Okay, yeah. Cuttlefish.
Yes, cuttlefish for the win here. Okay.
Congratulations.
So, cuttlefish are able to camouflage, they're able to change colors at will. What if this is an airborne type of cuttlefish that has a skin, a membrane skin, right? Because this is described as many as being featherless. What if it has a membrane that is capable of changing so it can disguise itself to be the color of the sky, the exact shade, and therefore goes unnoticed unless, say, it's swooping in or something or whatever. Sorry, this is like total out of left field, but goes in line with cryptozoological theory.
That my expression could be translated through the microphone right now, because you just blew me out of the water. I did not think that that's where you were going with that. At all. You're a bit nutso spaghetti-o, I think. That's a little crazy.
That is pretty crazy.
But you know what? It's obviously a real thing. That's a real animal.
Yeah.
Possibly. Because the reports are some feathered, some not. But most are that it's dark if it's camouflaging itself. I think, the fact that it would maybe operate at night somewhere in BC, California, kind of roam up through the Rocky Mountains sort of range area into very, very, very remote areas and prey on small fauna. Fish, deer, maybe even baby bears,
raccoons,
things like that, and bigger things like that.
Porpoises?
All kind. You're just naming stuff now. You're just naming things. What are you doing?
Kind of, sorry.
But it's more real. You know what else? I thought about Siberia too, because I was like, that's so remote. But I tried to find some reports of giant birds out there, but I couldn't really. There's owls and eagles and all kinds of things, but nothing.
Very similar, right? Because it's boreal forest. Like Canada.
It is, but it's there's harsher parts of it.
True,
for sure.
More remote,
and I feel like you might have an easier time, especially on the coast of Canada. There's a lot of remote section that's coastal too. Yeah. Even when you're out on like Victoria and on the island and parts just north of Vancouver. Super, super remote. Were you laughing at me?
I'm not laughing. I'm more laughing at myself. How dumb I am.
So I think, another really cool thing too, I didn't mention that Thunderbirds, one of the theories for Thunderbirds existing in Indigenous legend is the updrafts. We talked about that with like condors riding updrafts in cliff areas and in like crevices and stuff like that. There's ideas that Thunderbirds brought thunderstorms and lightning.
Yeah, and we didn't actually touch on that.
This was basically the theory is that eagles and stellar eagles and different types of birds like that around the world would ride in to shore.
Ride in the storm.
Updraft. They're out hunting.
They were the original riders on the storm.
Yeah, right? So the people would see this and the birds would come in and what would follow? Thunder and lightning. Yeah. Right? And that's where the legend came from. I think that's a really cool theory. I think that's probably the most accurate theory in terms of the actual
That's what anthropologists mostly subscribe to.
And I believe that. Yeah. But that doesn't account for the sightings of birds that are way bigger than just a bald eagle riding in a storm and people getting carried away by giant birds.
And the skull that not the Cantu child. The
Tong child.
The Tong child, yeah.
Which proves that eagles even today, the African crown eagle. Yeah. Will hunt primates.
Spooky man. Well, okay, so we have this cryptozoological argument, and then from there, kind of on the crazy note that I was on before, is sort of a more paranormal tangent.
Yep.
So there's things like what I just put out there, where maybe these, that could be just more cryptozoological, because we do have a reference point in the cuttlefish, but the paranormal, so I would kind of float towards the interdimensional
I think so.
Aspect?
I think so. I really do.
So.
Do you have a reason why? Because I do.
Do I have a reason why. It's not a very good one. And I kind of mentioned it off the top of the show when I was talking about that astronomer seeing a giant bird, but could not find any substantiation for that, what I remember hearing. I feel like I am trapped in a Mandela effect with that one. But what's your reason? What do you think?
Here's my reason. I think, okay, I always seem to go here. And people called me out for it on the Ogopogo episode, being like, you just chucked it in at the end. Interdimensional. And I'm like, yeah, well, guess what, buddy?
It's into the portal. Come on.
It's into the portal. That we're going through the portal here. Get with the program. No, but it does make sense. It plays into a lot of these cryptid creatures. Cryptonaut podcast mentioned that when they briefly about Sasquatch the other day. I don't even remember what episode it was, but just the idea of interdimensionality and how they think that that's more likely. Or the one guy did, anyway.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But I think that we're looking at all this fossil evidence of these ancient birds that were massive in North America as maybe being connected to a cryptozoological connection to the legend of Thunderbirds. Mm-hmm. So to maybe link that again to the interdimensional aspect, maybe these birds aren't exactly from the same period of like time, but just a different dimension. It's just like they're crossing over. It's like the reason why they're so big is because maybe it's interdimensional, but it's like a different period of time, I guess is what I'm trying to say. Like, it's not maybe it's the same prehistoric birds that did exist in our time. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Like, that's why they resemble the Teratorn, and that's why they resemble these prehistoric species. Or
from dimensions where just you know where you get the idea of the interdimensional aspect, where it's like, yeah, maybe there's just slight changes in each dimension. You kind of get like little, like, it's almost like turns of the screw.
Yeah, and just hair different.
Exactly. But what if everything's just bigger? It's like in Mario, when you go from the normal world to the giant world, and then you go back, and oh my gosh, I miss Mario now. But yeah, so that actually makes a lot of sense to me.
I mean,
because I love that idea that we're, like, say, humans themselves aren't capable of sort of flipping through the pages of all these different dimensions that are sort of residing beside each other, or, like, in relation to each other in some way. Like, or you could go with the bubble theory, where it's like we're all just a bunch of bubbles all, like, kind of touching sides all over the place, and some are further away from us, and some are closer and more recognizable, and whatever else. But yeah, that makes me think that these could be similar to the things like skinwalkers or Bigfoots that, like, say on the Skinwalker Ranch case, where there was, like, the documentation from the paranormal investigators where they, through the night vision goggles, the one guy actually saw the opening of something come up that looked like a portal, and then he saw a dark, big figure that looked like a Bigfoot come through.
Exactly.
And then the portal closed up.
Yeah.
And so what is that? That makes me think that these are happening more often than we like to think. Absolutely.
And obviously people like to exaggerate things too. But if you were to kind of like go the more fun route and think that the legend of even the rock and the legend of Thunderbirds on the West Coast being able to pick up small elephants or pick up small whales, that makes me think that, like, the birds that these people are seeing are obviously maybe not, you know, they're not visible all the time. So that's, you know, they're there when they need to be, or they're there when they want to be, or they're there by accident. But they're so big that they can attack the animals that exist definitively in our world that are way too big for the birds we know of that are definitively in our world to attack.
And what if they're not? Like, what if they have some help? Like, what if they aren't bound by the laws of physics? You know what I mean? Like, where they have greater lifting capability. What if they have, like, psychokinetic, that type of thing?
We're going real crazy. Real crazy. Quite frankly, here's my ultimate theory here. I quite frankly think that there's probably a subspecies of a condor, North American condor, California condor, that is some sort of an offshoot of a hybrid of a Teratorn species that managed to survive into our modern time, that has bred with condors, or a bird like a condor.
Yeah, cross species sort of.
Something like that, but it would have to be like the Teratorn was a bird of prey, because the thing with the condors is they don't have the talons like a raptor to pick things up.
Yeah.
So it has to be a hybrid species. But I think that the Middle America sightings, to me, I have a hard time. With those. The West Coast Thunderbird legends and East Coast Thunderbird legends coming in from the sea, coastal birds and territories in northern Canada and things like that that are
have
vast.
More credence to you.
I feel like it could exist. I also feel like in terms of the Middle Eastern legends of the Iraq, there's a lot of there's a lot of space in the deserts.
If you're thinking coastal versus inland, and if you tie in the idea that maybe these are migrational patterns, maybe these are coastal birds from Alaska, from the north, that do migrate down through Texas into the Mississippi, into the Gulf, and then they come back up. And so that's their pattern, and they're massive. And just to tie into that, okay. I saw footage on YouTube, because obviously we're Googling around, we're finding video clips and all this stuff, and there was that footage I found that wasn't contextualized, but it was basically from the window of a plane, and it was high above the clouds, like really high. And so could you imagine if these birds migrate like they do, and most, like 90% of the time, they're in these, like this is like 6,000 feet or something. This is higher than any other bird had ever been seen. Like that was like they were saying, like, this is crazy.
Yeah, they might travel
and
out
I will
of range.
include that in our reference notes, just so people can go check that out, because I need to go back and actually see where that was. But again, it was in North America, so... Yeah. In that regard, maybe they ride the updrafts. They are coastal, but they do have seasonality, migrational.
That's an interesting theory. That's really interesting.
It's coming up with me on spot.
And maybe and these sightings are just because of this seasonal pattern, but because they're so small.
Like the 3-week flap in Texas, right? Because they're just traveling through. They're just going on the way.
But the species is so small, the subspecies of it is so small that it's just like barely seen. Yeah, that's interesting. I like that one.
It's cool.
I like that one.
It's cool.
Anyway, I believe that there's giant birds out there.
Oh.
Actually...
on the note...
Sorry, yeah,
you believe there's giant birds? Everyone believes there's giant birds. Oh, I believe there's giant birds out there somewhere. I just on the note of migratory patterns and just people back in time trying to figure this stuff out, something I did not know until right before we recorded this episode, and I looked it up.
What's that?
Randomly. Apparently, in the 17th century, there was a man named Charles Morton. Okay. And he put forth the idea in his treatise that birds, because at the time, this is like, is this pre-Darwin? No, when was Darwin again? That was like, was that 1800s? I think it was. Anyway, sorry. I might be pre-Darwin, and we might sound like fools now. Sorry.
Probably.
But anyways, this was before they knew exact migratory habits of birds and things. They didn't really understand why birds come and go as they do. Yeah. And so he put forth this theory that birds migrate to the moon every winter. Oh, there you go. And he put it forth in like an actual document, like a treatise.
Maybe some of them do, man.
Maybe they do.
Maybe some
and he
of them
calculated
do.
the distances and everything. It was like
thousands.
Oh my God.
You put in the time. What a guy.
Well, he was serious.
Well, you know what? Good on him.
Good on him. Here's to you, Charles Morton.
Good try.
Good old Morty. I think that kind of wraps it up.
Yeah, that wraps it up for me. They're out there, though. Keep your eyes open for Thunderbirds.
I really hope everyone listening enjoyed our ramblings on the Thunderbirds.
Yeah, this was a longer episode than we wanted and or expected, but we had a really good time. There's giant birds out there. I'm convinced after looking at this, all this
There's
stuff.
something. There's something to it, which is why we did this episode. And so before we wrap it up, we would like to thank Zangus. Thank you for your awesome review. We really appreciate your enthusiasm. And also, thank you for illuminating for us some of the characteristic tendencies of the black condor. Or perhaps how DC treats the black condor. Just kind of throw them around a bit. Yeah, so that was awesome. And also to Josh Bolander. Apparently, I got his comment. It was a few days late, but he discovered us last week, I believe. And he says he's already re-listening to episodes, so we're really stoked on that.
Yeah,
thanks,
that's
man.
awesome.
Yeah.
Thanks, man. That makes us excited.
Honestly, you are the spark that keeps our motivation and our passion alive. So,
totally.
Boom, we appreciate you.
And as usual, if we reach out to us, let us know what you think. Right. Give us ideas. Yeah. Anything. We're into that. Into the Portal, mailbox@gmail.com. We're on Facebook. We're on Instagram. We're on Twitter. Into the Portal 1. Talk to us. Come chat with us.
Do it. We'll have a blog post up as well tomorrow, I guess. And otherwise, please, if you're digging the show, leave us a rating, a review. Like, we love reading those. Like, it really makes my entire week.
Yeah, it's awesome.
Makes my life.
Yeah, so if you're digging the show, please do that. And this has been
Go
fun.
check out the website. I'm so pumped we got that merch on the way for ourselves. Like, honestly, the main reason we went with TeePublic is because
we just wanted some stuff.
We did. Yeah, we wanted to rock it.
I just wanted a mug.
And it was risk-free, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Like, it was just like, we don't have to stock inventory, which is great.
Yeah.
And then you guys reap the benefits because it's really affordable.
Yeah.
If you want to rock some stuff, go for it. Like,
and the artwork from Desdemona is amazing. And Amber's artwork is great too. Amber did our logo, our black and white logo, and it's up there. So I'm stoked on that.
We're calling it the retro vinyl icon.
It's the retro vinyl icon.
The black and white.
Yeah. Anyway, go check that out. Links on the website. And thanks
we'll have
again
the show notes up. And thanks for listening.
Yes. Thank you so much for listening. And we will be back next week. We're not gonna give you any hints.
No, we're not. You gotta wait.
All right, guys.
Until next time, on Into the Portal.